Thank you for joining Jennifer Shelf and Associates in our 2019 Webinar Wednesday series. We are coming to you live from downtown Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday, and you can find the upcoming schedule on our website. Past webinars and all recordings are also on our website and our new YouTube channel, along with over 160 other recordings on federal contracting topics. All are complimentary. If you have questions for our speaker today, you can email him directly via the contact information you'll see on the last slide. And just a little bit about us, we are a Washington, D.C. based firm that provides services for federal contractors. This ranges from market analysis reports to proposal writing and also post-award compliance. More information is on our website, so please visit us there. This is an upcoming event that you can find more information here on our website. And we do offer advertising, so you can email me if you would like more information on that. And our webinar today is sponsored by AccuTrack. Here's a short message from them.
Consulting and Accounting Services is an 8A WOSB CPA firm committed to supporting entities to sustain growth in government contracting. Our outstanding DCAA accounting solutions reduce audit risk, improve cash flows, and give you peace of mind. Contact us today to learn how we can enhance your DCAA accounting efforts.
All right, our speaker today is Ed Salzberg. Thank you for joining us today, Ed, and he's going to be covering 4 business components to grow your government business. Ed, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mallory. Pleasure to be here. And I appreciate being on a session that Jennifer Shelf organizes. I've known Jennifer for, 15 years or so. I have a lot of respect for what she does in the government marketplace. And I've worked with her on programs in the past, especially when it has to do with GSA schedules, which is something that I actually don't do for government contractors. Let's see, Mallory, I can't remember what the next slide is, but let's move to it and see what it says. Okay, so I get a chance to introduce myself and ERS Advisors right here. So we're a DC-based firm. We focus on business acquisition training, primarily for mid and junior level staff, although the training that we do really is appropriate for senior staff as well. But what we like to do is level the playing field within organizations and bring more entry-level and really mid-career professionals really to improve their understanding of how to develop a capture program and execute proposals really effectively and essentially beat the competition. We also do bid pipeline management and capture and proposal management. But one thing that we focus on is what I like to call common sense, but not always common knowledge ways to beat the competition. Marketing and business development is not that complicated, but it can be made very complicated. And we try to get down to the essence of each element of the capture and proposal and pipeline management process to make it very easy to understand, so it's very clear what to do, what the next step is in the trajectory to winning government contracts. Across the government contracting industry, relatively few firms or divisions within firms grow explosively. The real question that I like to answer, and I'll get to it a bit in this session and also in the following session, is how do the organizations that consistently beat the competition do it? And how can yours be one of them? Next slide. So the elements of the program that I run, I've really learned over the last almost 40 years, I hate to say, as a senior officer in some of the major companies in the country. I started working at SAIC in the 1970s. I was a corporate officer pretty quickly, and then I was a senior officer in DynCorp, which became CSC, a partner in a small company that was acquired by DynCorp. The same thing with SRA. I was a partner in a small company, and in both cases we grew the company explosively, and I have to say I learned a lot. Spent some time with Battelle, an amazing company, as the leader of their environmental sector. And then I started ERS Advisors in 2007. And I've worked with a lot of the major companies and several small companies to really rationalize their capture program and put them on a pathway where they're growing much more consistently and in many cases explosively. I've worked with Novelist, Apt, a small firm called Technomics that does Navy work, across IT, environment, energy, facilities management. And the list goes on quite a while. Mallory, next slide. can't remember what's next, but this will be interesting for me too. So I do a training program, and that's really what I want to talk about today. And I call that Win More Government Work, Spend Less Money Doing It. Because it's not just about winning, but winning efficiently, which means reducing the cost of capture. If capture is very expensive, you've got a very inefficient program, and you may be growing your revenues smartly, but at a very high cost to the business. And what I provide is what I call insider tactics for winning government contracts. And they're really based on three concepts: leadership, well-led, scaling, analytics, and unified common terms. And I'm going to go through some of those here. And as I said in the beginning, everything I do, I try to simplify so that you'll really see that what I'm saying is common sense, things you know already, but maybe not in the context that I present them. So they're not always common knowledge ways to beat the competition. Okay, Mallory, next slide. I've found from experience that the leading contractors have one thing in common. They are all masters of 11 essential elements that drive their growth. And I'm going to cover one or two here in terms of the analytics, and then in the next presentation, in the second half of the hour, I'm going to go through 3 or 4 of those, what I think are the 11 precepts to growing the business. But the ones that follow those precepts, and I believe they all do, even if they don't use the same terms that I do, the common feature of those firms that are effective are that their revenue profiles have short treads and steep risers, which means they bid and win more often than the average firms in the business. The analytics of measuring where you are in your business development program and how you're moving through it shouldn't be casual. It should be based on numbers that you drive from your capture program. And I'm going to go over several of those in this short training that we're going to do. If you learn the tactics that I teach, you'll have gained knowledge to help your organization to get on a much stronger growth pathway. Okay, next slide. This may seem obvious, but the goals of the capture program are to establish a pipeline of important bid opportunities, get the right competitive data to qualify them, which is really important. There's a lot of data out there. Much of it is just unconsolidated glacial debris. The question is, which data elements, what is it that really separates you from the competition? What do you need to know? And how do you get information in front of management so that they make a timely and informed bid decision? And when I say well-led, this is the part that I'm talking about. Management involved in that bid decision is really critical to the effectiveness of a program. Very often that's done way more casually than it should. As a result, you end up with teaming situations that are suboptimal at a minimum and really can hamper your ability to win the contract. Increasing win rates and spending fewer dollars on it. So focusing on the analytics can increase the win rate, and focusing on the efficiency of your program will reduce the cost of capture. And the measures that tell you where you are in those two indicators really are critical. And I think I touch on one of those in this training or the next one, but I do in the overall training. The Win More Work training I do is a full-day training. I like to do it in-house, but I also do it online on occasion as well. Next slide. I had mentioned the 3 pillars: well-led, scaled, and unified, and they're all based on they all drive a company toward consistently growing corporate revenues through informed bid decisions based on information that fully defines the competitive nature of the procurement. I'm going to define some of these terms in just a second. And timely bid, no bid decisions that consciously apply resources to the best opportunities. You can use analytics to measure aspects of your pipeline from the beginning part of your pipeline to theoretically well-defined opportunities that tell you where you need to be spending your resources from a total capture standpoint, a total pipeline management standpoint. And with those analytics, if you do apply those analytics, you're in a position to actually grab the reins of your capture program and drive it uphill, drive it to success, so that you really do have a steep tread and a steep riser and a short tread to move your program forward. Okay, I want to talk about Unified for just a second, and I think the next slide does, Mallory. Yeah. So one thing I like to train on is common terms within a company, and I found at SAIC especially, we did develop a set of common terms. We didn't do it consciously. We kind of did it. We sort of backed into the terms, and I captured some of those. And I realized early on that the language of business development was really critical, that needed to be deployed across the company, horizontally across divisions, and then vertically within divisions as well. And common terms are an element of unification that really can speed up the whole capture process, because important business development concepts are clearly defined and understood across the capture teams. I'm going to explain a few that I use consistently and why I use them. The first one is the competitive nature of the bid, really how that competitive landscape is forming. And the competitive nature of the bid means how the landscape is being formed. The competitive landscape is being formed. It's a very short, clear term. If I didn't have the term, I'd be forced to talk to people maybe along these lines. I'd be saying things like, is the program changing in emphasis? Does the office have a new set of responsibilities? Is the budget shifting, moving up and down? Are there new firms marketing that office? Has some of the work leaked out of the prime's contract? All of those things that define the competitive nature of the bid. I can in each meeting say all of those things and take some time, or merely ask someone, do you understand the competitive nature of the bid? So I was doing some training at Cadmus several years ago, a great company that does environmental and energy work, not only for federal contractors, but for state and local government and commercial firms as well. And we focused on this competitive nature of the bid term in their capture meetings. And I have to say, their capture meetings went from an hour to about 20 minutes, just because we had already predefined that term. And then we used that term to measure the competitive nature of the bid and where they stood on that playing field against the competition. Coach is a term that I like to use, and that's someone who knows the competitive nature of the bid. If I have some time in the afternoon, let's say I'm working on a capture program for a particular opportunity, if I have a few free hours in the afternoon, I might go down and try to get in to see the client. If I know the client, I may get into the door. If I don't know the client, getting harder and harder to get in and talk to them. Or I could spend those 2 hours going through my Rolodex or talking to other folks that I know and trying to find someone that I could bring in that does know the client and does know that opportunity better than I do. The coach is someone that you can bring in that can help you shorten the amount of time it takes to answer all of the questions, that enables you to understand how the landscape is forming, the competitive landscape, and the competitive nature of that bid. If you can find a coach who knows the competitive nature of the bid, it could be a recent graduate from the office, someone in your company who's previously worked in the agency. I don't get to just answer 1 or 2 questions that I might get answered in that meeting downtown. I get to answer all of the questions that I have about that opportunity. It's a way to leverage my time. So I'd rather be working on the process of getting the information than myself actually going out and getting the information, because I can get so much more done that way. The teaming decision point is a critical term too. It's a term I like because it defines the point at which you understand the competition well enough to be able to close on your team. If you do that early in the opportunity assessment, too early in the assessment, before you have that decision point really clearly defined, you may be adding firms. You may be waiting too long to get the right firms on, or you may be adding firms too early that you find out later that they are not the right firms. Now the question is, how do you know when you're at the teaming decision point? And I can't give you the answer for every opportunity, but I can give you for any opportunity in general. But in a discussion, I can help you get to that decision point in any opportunity, because it really depends upon how well you understand the competitive nature of the bid. Okay, let me just move along because I can see I'm going to take too much time here. So one of I talked about the analytics, and there are 5 health measures that tell you whether or not you've got a healthy contract, whether you have a healthy company actually, as well as a healthy bid development and capture program. I had a graduate school professor who continually said that you don't know much about something unless you can measure it. There are probably lots of counterexamples, but this caution does apply to business development. I use 5 indicators that measure the BD heart rate, lung capacity, temperature, muscle mass, and blood flow of the company, of the business development program, and really of the company itself. Next slide. And they are what I call firm contract backlog, which measures urgency, qualified proposal backlog, which measures the stability of the business development program, qualified leads backlog, which measures nothing about your capture program, but does give you a good indicator of marketplace vitality, and sales efficiency, which is a return on investment. These are 4, and the last one is velocity, which is the speed of moving your program, your captures through a defined business process. Okay, move on. I'm going to go into one of the measures that I call firm contract backlog. And I say that it's a measure of urgency because it's the historical basis for adding up the revenue that the firm has in its backlog. So firm contract backlog is the absolute minimum amount you're going to get out of your existing contracts or your existing relationships if your revenue is not based directly on individual contracts. And I like to use a 5-year period to measure that number, and I get a single number for firm contract backlog for a company because many government contracts are based on a 5-year time frame, cost plus fixed fee contracts. Many of the mission support contracts are 5 years. Many are not, and if they're not, then a longer period might be right. But I'm just going to show you 2 firms here. One I'm calling the relaxed firm, and the other I'm calling the frantic firm, and I'm measuring their firm contract backlog over the next several years on this slide. And the way I calculate that is I add up the revenue that I know is coming through contracts. I don't mean the obligated amount to the contracts, but I mean what the contract managers know from their relationships with their customers, what the likely revenue is, and I mean more than likely, what the 90% firm revenue going to come through all of those contracts are. And of course, if I only look at firm contract from existing vehicles, over time as those vehicles reach their period of performance, obviously that line is going to come down. It's called a waterfall chart. But if you look at these 2 companies starting at $20 million in 2008, I've been doing this training for quite a while, you can see that the relaxed firm has a very strong firm contract backlog, probably newer contracts, and with fewer recompetes coming up in the next few years. The firm in red, which I'm calling the frantic firm, that's got a steep slope. So it's starting to run out of money in its refrigerator and its freezer, what it's got stored away to pay its bills over the next several years. And what that business development program has to do each year is to fill that gap, that vertical gap between say the red dots and the 20 line to maintain the company. And if you're trying to grow the company by 10 or 15 or 20% a year, you see you could draw a line above there. That and the difference between each of those red dots and that line that you're drawing, which is showing growth in the firm, is what you've got to deliver from your business development program. You see that there are actual analytics that you can apply so that you know how much you should be spending on your capture programs in each of the measures that I talk about: firm proposal backlog, leads backlog, and qualified leads background. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to move just a little bit more quickly because we're almost up to the 20 minutes. In the decision process, I had mentioned earlier that management needs to understand the quality of the bids that are in the pipeline. And I've seen funnels that do this. I like a pyramid, and I like it because I can simplify what it takes to get to one level of the pyramid to the next. I call them stages. And let me just work you up from the bottom. where I define prospects, which is just work that a firm, and I'm calling the firm Federal, can do, could prime. It doesn't mean that they're going to win it. It just means that internally you look at the scope of work and the customer, the time frame, the level, the projects that you need to qualify, and you can do the work. You wouldn't protest in the national interest if the firm won the contract. I'd like to use a 5-step process to qualify the opportunities, and as you go up to each stage, each level, you have a more qualified bid. And the question is, how do you get from stage 1 to stage 2? There's a lot of things you could be doing. You could run down and talk to the client. You could write a white paper. You could go to conferences and try to get more information. You could do a lot of research on the topic. You could get smart on it. But there's only really one thing that really needs to be answered, one question that needs to be answered to go from 1 to 2, to go from a prospect to a lead. And it gets back to the competitive nature of the bid. The only question that really matters is how high is the bar? Is a competitor locked to win the work? Is the incumbent so entrenched that you're not going to beat them technically, or so entrenched that they're doing things that can't be replaced, even if you do have the tools and the means to replace them? How you get the answer to the question? Well, it comes back to the coach and other aspects of capture management that I talk about. But I just wanted you to see that you can simplify the bid process, the capture process, into very simple questions that move you to better and better qualified opportunities. If the answer is the bid is the bar is very high, you want to no bid that right away. That's a way to increase the efficiency of your capture program, because you're then not spending money on bids you can't win. You don't want to answer that question later on. You want to answer that question now. You want to answer that question before you answer the next question, which is, am I on the playing field? Does the customer think that I'm credible? Why would I want to answer that question before I know whether the incumbent can be knocked off or not? And there are always reasons why the incumbent or your competition is either vulnerable or really has circled the wagons and is not vulnerable. It's your job to find that out. There are many ways to do that. I talk about a coach, but I talk about several other ways to do that to really confirm the answers to those questions. But I think you can see that as you answer those questions and get up the stages, when you finally get to 4, what you have is a well-qualified bid. You've got an opportunity in which you know the playing field is level, you know you're on it, and now you can start to tilt the playing field in your direction. And there's a whole ton of ways that you can now bring in relationships and steps and activities that you can do to make the client really, really prefer you over the competition. Okay, so this gets back to the analytics. Let's move a little more quickly, and I'll try to wrap this up. Stage 1 and stage 2, if you add those together, I call those leads backlog. That really measures the vitality of the marketplace. 3 and 4 together, I call qualified leads background, and it measures the vibrancy of your bid capture program. And then finally, your proposal backlog measures the stability of your bid capture program. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up in 2 minutes. Keep going. Let's see. So here's a way to calculate your qualified proposal backlog. And I'm just going to sort of go through this left to right. So on the left, we have proposals that are submitted to various clients. The the value of those proposals, the performance, the period of performance, the client discount. That means how much money do they actually have. The advertised amount is one thing, how much their budget really looks like. That's looking at the budget documents and talking, and that's understanding the clients very well. Your win rate is a function of where you're bidding it from. Stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'd say you should always be bidding from stage 4, but sometimes you don't for various reasons. And to the right, you get an expected value. In this case, it's $12 million. Let's assume on the bottom where I say qualified proposal backlog required for 20% growth. What I'm trying to do is take a firm that's $10 million in 2008 or now or at any time period. And in order to grow at 20%, they need a revenue of $12 million next year, and then 14 the year after that, 17, and so forth. They need $90 million. Let's assume Their contract backlog is 60 million. Remember the previous chart, I say if you add that all up over a 5-year period, you've got a $60 million gap. That means your proposal, your qualified proposal backlog is going to deliver $60 million over 5 years, which means you need about $12 million a year. And in this year, you can see the expected value is $12 million. I kind of gamed it so it came out that way. But the only point of that chart is that there's a way to calculate your targets. And if you're below the target, you've got to invest in that measure. If you're above the target, you may want to relax and move it to another spot, okay? So, Mellor, I guess we hit the end of the hour. There's a few other things in there, but I hope you stick around for the second session where I'm going to be talking about things that are not so analytical, but really critical aspects of your capture program. My information is on there. Actually, my security and sustainability forum.org is on there, but you can also reach me at esalzberg@ersadvisors.com. Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insight today. Today's presentation has been recorded and can be found on our website or YouTube channel within about 48 hours. If you have any questions, please contact Ed directly with the email, phone number shown on your screen. And thank you. This concludes the webinar.
Thank you.